Welcome to another IoT Central Podcast episode, where IoT professionals share their stories, insights, and expertise. IoT Central is the leading global community for professionals advancing the Internet of Things. Our community is free to join at iotcentral.io. Today's guests are Loic Bonvarlet, VP of Product and Marketing at Kigen. Joining Loic is Toby Grimshaw, Senior Director of Business Development at Kigen. Listen to them share their stories about how they are pioneering integrated security, the future of the SIM card, the latest innovations from MWC'21 Barcelona, and much more. Let's get right to it.
Okay, thanks IoT Central for having us today. My name is Loic Bonvarlet, and I'm the Vice President for Product and Marketing at Kigen. And I'm joined here today by Toby Grimshaw, who is our Senior Director for Business Development at Kigen.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. And it's great to be your co-host today. And I'm happy to share this spot because I can ask you a whole load of questions that I normally can't get to see you and ask you. So that's great news.
Free time for Toby. That's great. So for our guest on the show today, I think I can talk a little bit about Kigen and what we do and what's our mission and who we are effectively, right? So I'll start with the mission of Kigen. Kigen is a company that was incubated within ARM, and our mission is about really connecting securely devices at large. That's really our high-level mission. That's what we are proud and happy to do in the market today. And in a shorter-term view, I would say we focus on integrating security as a cornerstone of innovation. And we do that notably thanks to what is the future of the SIM card that you know and that you have all in your phones, right? So the eSIM for embedded SIM or integrated SIM for iSIM. So in terms of Kigen structure, we do origin in ARM. We are today 135 people. We have an HQ in Belfast, and we are dotted all across the world effectively. So just me personally, on how I started with Kigen, that is back in 2018. And I joined as the lead for the marketing and product management in the summer of 18. And very happy to be there. We went through the launch of Kigen as an autonomous company within ARM back last year. And this is really great to be here with you. So maybe I'll let it with Toby a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Loic. So I'm Director of Business Development. I really focus on sort of OEMs and the sort of device side of the ecosystem. And I've been at ARM originally about 6 years, and I then was part of the IoT Services group. And I was approached by the Kigen team to come on this journey that we're on about a year ago. So I'm fairly new to the domain, but it's given me some great insights from my experience previously on the IoT side, on device and OEM side, has given me some great insights into the ecosystem that Kigen operates in, and hopefully we can share some of that today of what that looks like and some of the exciting things that are going on in that space at the moment.
Great. Well, thanks, Toby. That will be good to hear about. So, yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit to start with the big event that happened last week, right, Toby, MWC?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first question on that one, did you, we've been living in this COVID world, so did you manage to go? Have you been able to go to get there?
No, so unfortunately not. I have not been there, but we had one person of the company, Paul Bradley, our Director of Strategy and Innovation, who went there and delivered a great keynote about notably IoT Safe. We can get to that at some point. I didn't have a chance to go there. Really missed it this year, but at the same time, I feel that it was quite exciting to see finally people getting back to business. And actually, from what I hear from the show, we got a lot of good high-level meetings, quality audience. So we got already quite a nice few decisions and outcomes coming out of those meetings from our ecosystem. And that's really, really great to see.
And what did you think was new in IoT? What was the buzz around MWC this year around IoT?
Yeah, so I think one interesting evolution I've observed is really more and more companies converging right across multiple domains, and namely, so MWC is the temple of connectivity. but that is extending on, for example, machine learning at the edge, and the need for ubiquitous security effectively across the board, right? There is really, really a strong attention from the entire ecosystem, from businesses to consumers, to really have security baked into their device, and even pushing it further. And we had our CEO commenting on that, Vincent Costanger, who basically said that there is a stronger and stronger expectation to see security of devices and data that people put out there really as a basic human right. Goes all this way. And I personally feel the desire for it, right? In my day-to-day life with the device I interact with, I try to pay attention to this stuff. And I think people are more and more aware of that and pay more and more attention to that in their choices for buying stuff effectively.
So security was a sort of a resonant point that was coming through from the event. That was sort of a reinforcement of that.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe it was a bit difficult for some of the guys on site to be on a big scene with not necessarily a lot of people in front of them. But I think, looking at the numbers that GSMA has put out, that there are 20,000 persons on site, but 120,000 people attending digitally. And to be fair, I found that the digital platform this year was quite usable. I had some struggle sometimes on some of those, but this was quite usable, quite baked in with LinkedIn features and Microsoft Teams to book ad hoc meetings, etc. So overall, I find they did a pretty good job at building an hybrid event effectively. Really, that's what it was.
So just back to your point of security, Loic. You were just saying there around your views of security and that view. So one question is, do you think the place and the value of security is really understood across the value chain? We talk about security, but are you starting to see sort of a real desire of adoption of security from those organizations and from MWC, from the environment at MWC in particular?
Yeah, it's a good question, Toby. I think I see really the earlier steps of the ecosystem of the supply chain. For example, the chipset makers, the module maker, really looking at implementing security as really a default part of their offering. And that's a great side for me. I've been working in this space for quite some time, and it was kind of always of a hard sell to implement and to have those type of features, considered as part of the scope of a good product or what is important. So my former space was working in the cellular module space, and for many years it was all about just connectivity, performance, radio performance, and all that. And so now I think it's becoming a bit secondary, because effectively what matters to people is that the right data is sent, right? Just the right amount, not a huge ton of data, and that it's properly protected when it's transmitted, stored, whether it's on the device or on the back end. So people like Altair and Sequence and Qualcomm and all the big names in the industry are all taking steps to really bake security right from the get-go into their product. So, and I think there is a real stride for them to make that more usable for their end customers.
Okay, and how do you see? Because again, I'm new to the ecosystem over the last year, but sort of that whole resonance of how you can leverage SIM technology on that journey of security, and how, for example, you mentioned IoT Safe. How do you see that playing into the choices in ensuring that we get security throughout the entire value chain? So, if I'm a device maker, I can reliably know that I can make a device, I can produce a device, and then I can have that device connecting to any cloud, but all of that data is secure. Do you want to share? Can you share a little bit about IoT Safe as part of that mechanism to sort of take that security to the next level as we leverage some of this technology?
Yeah, sure. So, I just invite you and the listeners also to really have a look at some of the material we've put out there, notably on our Kigen.com website, and notably you'll see Paul's keynote, who really does a good job at presenting what it is. To put it simply, right, it's about leveraging an asset that is there when you do cellular IoT. That's really one of the starting points. Cellular has been exploding for the last 30 years, notably because of the strong security mechanism that were provided through the SIM card and through the authentication of, a user, a SIM card connected to a network, and it's properly managed. And there was no really any major breakdown of that system for the last 30 years. And so building on that strong foundation, but which is kind of a specialist foundation, right? We want to really leverage the secure SIM assets to also protect the application, right? So typically when you do an IoT device, you generate data on the device for whatever shape or form. You will analyze it, you will process it, and then you will transmit it. But when you transmit it, it's protected when it's circulating on the cellular network, but not necessarily after. And here we are really talking about the overall protection from chip to cloud, right? From the point of generation to the point of consumption as much as possible. And by consumption in IoT, I would say we are talking about the cloud service, for example, that is hosting the reception of all the data that's coming in. So really leveraging this asset with a small application that run inside the SIM card. And by the way, that can run into any type of SIM card, whether it's a plastic SIM card, an eSIM, or an integrated SIM. And we'll bust all this jargon later together, Toby. But basically, really leveraging this strong hardware security to protect the data end to end, like you do when you buy something on the internet, for example.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. I know we'll come to that, the sort of concepts of that. So, also at MWC, Kigen had some announcements again around some of these new technologies and new partnerships and new ecosystem, as you were saying. Have you got a couple of examples of what we shared at MWC? Some of the announcements that were made.
Yeah, sure. So two big things, I would say. We worked with our partner Soracom, with a big connectivity supplier in the APAC region, right? Who have demonstrated basically and adopted the integrated SIM technology through our other partner Sony Altair on their chipset, the 1250 chipset. So it's a chipset that is enabling LP1 connectivity, CAT-M, NB, IoT, and 2G, and with an integrated SIM powered by Kigen iSIM OS. So that's one, and it's great to see, the number of connectivity supplier already enabled on that platform. There are big tier ones, MNO like Vodafone. There are MVNOs. There are specialist connectivity suppliers. So I think it's great to see a certain choice already in terms of connectivity on these first integrated SIM. The other one that we talked about was SIMCom. SIMCom is one of the major cellular module maker in the world, and they announced their SIM7070 cellular modules, also enabled with a Kigen eSIM in that case, so an eSIM, a soldered eSIM inside the module, and remote SIM provisioning. So I think that resonates well with our ambition to say we are providing the future of SIM, in the sense that we look at holistically whether it's a discrete SIM, an embedded SIM, or an integrated SIM, really, that we can deliver those type of solutions to the market and really fit for purpose as much as possible.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. Thank you. So I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a device maker. I'm an enterprise out there. I'm an OEM, and I do talk to a lot of these organizations on a daily basis. And it would be really good, I think, for the audience, for those particularly listening in here, very often people just want to get the basics right. There's lots of acronyms of what we mean. So if I can just do the Q&A with you, with your particular role on this one, is can we just go through some of the terminology here and just be really, really clear about what we mean for the audience? And then maybe what we can then do is talk about, so what does all this mean to a device maker today from having MWC, and maybe what they can do on that particular journey. So if I can just start with the first one, if I may, which is, what is data generation?
Oh, you start with a tough one, Toby, here. No, to keep it very simple, right? So when you build a SIM card, effectively, the purpose of the SIM card is like a safe, right? Buying a safe doesn't buy you the money or the paper that you put into it, right? And data generation is about working with the connectivity suppliers, the mobile network operators, to basically create the secrets that will be loaded into, let's say, a SIM card, for example. So if we talk about a discrete SIM card, right, so built by one of our partners, for example, we will generate the data coming out of the files that we are shared very securely with our connectivity partner, and we'll create the encrypted data that will be loaded onto the SIM card. And this process is called, in the SIM business, effectively, data generation. We like to kind of maybe simplify a bit the terminology in our presentation by talking about digital key insertion, which is a bit more explicit, maybe.
Okay, perfect. So digital key insertion. And so if we then turn to the SIM and the form factors that we've got, talk a little bit about that. So, we've all got a mobile phone. We all know, well, most of us would know what a SIM card actually is. So can we take that a stage further and explain what an eSIM is?
Sure. So an eSIM, and the E means the following, means embedded, right? So we are already talking about an evolution in form factor from your well-known piece of plastic that you insert into your mobile phone, at least in most countries today, to basically the same fundamental chip inside, right? It's the exact same chip, the exact same processor type of capabilities, but in a different package. And this package is called, or has the acronym of embedded, because it's typically embedded into the device. And by embedded, typically soldered onto the PCB, right? The kind of motherboard of a device. So you have a spot where you solder this embedded SIM. And so with that form factor change, there was then the need to be able to work on this asset remotely, right? So effectively, the form factor change triggered the need to be able to potentially manage remotely what was inside the safe.
Okay. And we'll come to the managing that in a moment. So very simply put, it's a physical SIM in a certain form factor put inside the device, my device I'm going to sell. So I don't have my slot for my SIM anymore, effectively. It's inside the device.
Yeah.
And then the stage on from that is integrated SIM, iSIM. So could you just expand on two things, if I may, around that, which I think are valuable for AMs, is what is it, but why, and what does it bring by having integrated SIM as the big next step forward?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's another form factor leap, if I could say. In an integrated SIM, you still find the same SIM function and most of the time the same SIM and secure hardware capabilities. That is that you have effectively a processor that is, instead of being into its separate package with its associated memory to run the SIM itself, is baked into what we call typically a system on chip. So it's a blueprint design that is integrated. This processor plus maybe other components, a main processor, for example, for running the radio stack, all the cellular function, right? You merge effectively those functions into a single system on chip. But still, I think it's very important to underline that with dedicated hardware functionality to protect the credentials. So you still have effectively a safe, right? An hardware safe, but the packaging is very, very integrated. And to your second point of your question, the immediate benefit, right, you can think of is integration and size. Right? You do reduce massively the size, up to 98% compared to a typical embedded SIM soldered on a PCB. So that's one thing. You can also optimize the communication between typically the main chipset and the integrated SIM, because you are not dependent on some external standard bus or that are not necessarily optimized. So you can reduce the power consumption of this system overall. And this is a very important thing to watch, because you can see the explosion of devices which are working on low power WAN networks. And I often quote the case of devices that are sitting there on a single charge. They have a battery, they are deployed in the field, and the life of the device will be limited by the duration of the battery, effectively. So the more you optimize this, the better. And the third point is, well, from integration of chipsets, of microprocessors, etc., comes ultimately with the volume a cost reduction. And we believe that we can reduce significantly the total cost of ownership by going integrated with volume.
Okay, so to give you an example, actually, Loic, to that. So I was talking to an OEM, and they're developing a tracker, and they have identified, they didn't really understand iSIM when we had a conversation around this and explaining they were looking at embedded SIM, but they've realized that they have to get their device down to such a small size for them to be able to address their true total addressable market in this particular space. So for them, the iSIM is an exponential jump because of the impact of the size reduction, the power efficiency, and the optimization, and ultimately the cost over the life cycle of the device on the volume piece. So I'm just giving you've defined what it is. I'm just giving you some feedback of conversations I'm actually having with quite a few companies that are coming with this same sense of desire and understanding of what that looks like. So that's on the device side. As an OEM, there's massive movements at the moment in terms of ability to do that. And also, I think to your point, to add to that and around MWC is that the rubber is now hitting the road on integrated SIM. It's been an emerging market, and it's been on the slide decks, and actually it's now coming into market this year. So we have partners that we have evaluation kits people can pick up and start developing today on this product. It's real, it's available, and you can go and buy it and get your products to market. So I think that's a really important one. This is emerging, but it's moving from emerging and actually going to market. I
think for me, my one of my motto into working on this type of product is really to make it simple to use, and we really strive to make it so that people who were not even considering cellular could say, I have a dev kit which is ready to connect. I don't have to go and source connectivity and source all these different pieces, right? I go buy a dev kit and try it out and plug it to my product and see what happens. And that's where we ignite creativity, I would say. And that's where I'm really finally seeing some new companies that we've never heard before saying, maybe this is in for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can validate what you're saying there with the types of organizations. There's an early understanding that's coming through this. I'm talking to lots of large organizations that are wanting to understand the capability and the impact of what this brings to their businesses, and being able to access hardware, to your point, that they can go and develop on very simply today. That's quite a few examples that I've got of organizations that look at that. So if I'm also a device maker going, this is great, you can help me get a new market with my product and a smaller, that's great. So explain to me how this kind of terminology of RSP, this remote SIM provisioning, how does that play into giving me the capability for me to truly take my business and scale? I've got customers, whether I'm a startup or I'm a large organization, I've got customers that I want to engage with in different regions of the world. How I've got this device, great. I understand the rudiments of single point connectivity. Please explain to me what the rest of this terminology means around RSP and remote SIM provisioning, please.
Sure. Yeah. So remote SIM provisioning, and let's maybe go back for a minute to the roots of it, right? So why was an embedded SIM invented originally? Well, that was to serve the automotive market, which was one of the first markets that needed something better than a discrete plastic SIM card. When I was supporting customers integrating cellular module, notably in the telematic space, right? For example, building a black box that you deploy in a fleet of trucks, for example, that sits into a desert area. Well, the failure was the SIM warping because of the heat. So that's automotive with the explosion of telematic services for your day-to-day car, e-calls and stuff like that. They really needed something that is automotive grade, how we call it in the industry, which is basically something that can sustain high temperature, that will not degrade itself with harsh conditions. So that's the story for embedded SIM, really. And then the need for, well, that's great to have an embedded SIM, but if I have to have an embedded SIM for Vodafone in UK, for SFR in France, for AT&T in the US, this is a nightmare for me as an automaker. I have to buy a cellular module. I have to buy 5, 10, 15, 20 SKUs for my SIM cards. Sorry, it doesn't work for me. So when the industry came up together and say, well, we know we want to maintain the high level of security that is provided by the SIM card, but we need a way to be able to select and have the SIM card being remotely provisioned from a system that is very secure, so that I can load connectivity from this or that operator dynamically, not only during the manufacturing stage, but also dynamically over the lifetime of the product. So effectively, what remote SIM provisioning allows is to really have, for example, an initial connectivity profile into a SIM card, and then over a secure platform that players like Kigen can deliver to the market, load another profile and activate it, another connectivity, another MNO, and, for example, tackle the very simple use case of my car is built in the US and it ships to France, or it ships in Germany and it goes to the USA, right? So you could have the German profile from a big German automaker, and our US customers who like their big German cars can download their AT&T connectivity and be happy about it, and attach it to, for example, their own subscription. So that's one very concrete use case, right? So if you expand out of that, it can then apply to any type of device who have global requirements, global connectivity requirements, effectively.
And do you find, to that point, so that sounds like there's a real simplification of, I can make one device, maybe ideally with one SKU, and then that can be deployed rather than having lots and lots of different SKUs potentially in the world. How far away are we from that, the end game, or what's the journey that we really need to go on? Because it still feels like we're still on a journey, and we've got to take the device makers on this journey and guide them through this process as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got any comments around that.
No, certainly. So yeah, it's been a journey, because this stuff is around for quite some years already, to be fair, since 2016, I would say, for the automotive, the first M2M remote SIM provisioning specification, and the first big OEM implementing those. And at the time, really, this was kind of only a premium market with high complexity to be able to, for example, an automaker to deploy this platform, use it, and establish all the needed relationship with all the different MNOs. And my view on the way to simplification on that is to work really on the supply chain and address this problem at scale earlier in the supply chain. And I finally see, I would say, a very strong interest from the chipset and module players, cellular module players. So the ones that typically power all the connected device, which is not a phone, not a tablet, right? You have a cellular module typically that aggregate the cellular functionality. Well, these guys are all now considering a solution to embed connectivity into their cellular module. And that's, to me, the fundamental way of being successful, is because it's a specialist industry, it's still complex a bit to deploy. If we address the problem at scale earlier in the chain, then it's fixed for anybody who wants to use it. And they don't have to even think about the complexity of it, because it's already there. It's out of the box, let's say by the module maker, for example.
Yeah, and Kigen's role in that is abstracting away the complexity for end device makers to focus on what they really want to do, which is make good devices using the right technology, which enables their business models to come through. So just one point around MWC and sort of the announcement piece was about machine learning and actually how important that sort of plays into what we're doing and actually how that evolves in the whole kind of IoT acceleration, this constrained device and the ability to have machine learning at the edge effectively. I don't know if that's something also that's been resonating through in MWC.
Yeah, so I think it does. And the reason it does is because it's nowadays less and less of a specialist area, the machine learning and artificial intelligence. Developing the frameworks that help you to build solutions like that is very hard. But those frameworks are becoming more and more available and are no longer an exclusivity of, let's say, the cloud and, the hyperscalers. You don't need necessarily only to have this running into an AWS or Azure. This can run at the edge, really inside your device. And what's exciting about this is that one of the problems I've seen many times earlier in my career is the explosion of useless data that being sent back to server and that then you have to store and manage and process, in massive amounts. And if you reverse a bit the problem and say, well, if I go back to the point of origination, and if I really take a hard thought about what real data do I need, right, at the point of origination and what type of processing I could do there, well, then you would save a lot of effort and a lot of cost downstream. You wouldn't have to transmit all this data back. You'll save a lot of trees, effectively, because these devices are really built to consume barely any power. That's really their purpose in life, and ARM is enabling a lot of those devices in the field. But so why it's important and why I've seen more of it lately is the frameworks are there to be able to use it even for non-experts in that field. We work, for example, with this company and Edge Impulse, right? And we at the end do a great explanation, their CTO, about what's feasible already there on a previous webinar together with IoT Central. So this is becoming accessible. And what does that mean for a device? That means, well, people are going to put more thought into what runs at the device, right? More intel, more knowledge of what they do. And all that means, well, data is becoming more valuable when it's sent back. So more valuable equals more security needed, equals benefit from hardware security when you can. And so that's I think, a trend that we'll see more and more.
And also that fills the circle, doesn't it, in terms of being able to make sure that the constrained device has the battery life and the power. So the efficiency of that modeling of the machine learning at the edge is critical as well in itself. It's got to be highly optimized and effective of the machine learning because you've got a constrained device in the actual field.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So if I can for a moment just give you my view of the world, just from a perspective, I've come into the ecosystem, I've come into the world of Kigen, and the organization is right at the heart of a revolution at the moment, is my outside view. And there's a couple of major sort of takeaways that I can see in this. One, this is a very, very complicated environment that we're operating in. I know it's a cliche, people say they're complicated, but it's also complicated because of the nature of the collaboration needed through these silicon partners and these connectivity partners to forge through. It's a huge part of the journey. It's not just a technology issue. It's actually how does the business model need to shift? Where are the drivers and how people need to reposition their businesses, whether you're an M&O with the traditional I buy and I sell SIMs to actually enabling technology to happen in new markets in different thinking. So that's, for me, has been one of the most exciting parts of this journey. If I'm an OEM, there's a whole bunch of ecosystem of organizations that have a vested interest of making your enterprise successful in this space. And that collaboration has brought some innovation, but also has brought some fantastic accelerations, I think, in that space. And certainly, the Kigen, the respect of that piece has been absolutely huge. And the other piece that I've kind of seen is how you translate what we're doing, and we're abstracting away a lot of the context, but how do we translate that back to the OEM? The questions that you're asked higher up the chain are simpler questions, but they are the fundamental questions. And the things I've learned of engaging with them is they're asking business model questions. How do I change my business model? And we're having to be able to show how you can enable a device and you can enable the connectivity of that allows you to unlock the business model. So there's a whole raft of ecosystem work, which we're working through at the moment about how to educate those OEMs, because it is a very challenging perspective about, I don't understand this space, how can you simplify this for me, but also explain to me what the benefits are actually going to be. And I think one of the things I think you've been working with your team, isn't it, we'll talk about a little bit, is a kind of, for me, it's the perfect, it's my idiot's guide. You know, if it says yes, I go here. For me, I wish I had seen that on day one, and we have it now, and I will be promoting this like anything, but this is a beautiful start point. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your team's been trying to do of messaging out to those to give them choices in the router when they're making those decisions?
Yeah, so sure, I can speak a bit about that. So yeah, the team has been working on trying to really simplify the selection tree that you have to go through when you're considering your connected cellular devices. And in the lines of what's in the future of SIM for me as an OEM, right? So basically a kind of decision tree which helps you to select the right SIM hardware and SIM function for your next cellular IoT design. And based on a certain number of simple questions, say, do you have, environmental constraints? Do you have a power constraint? Do you have highly integrated constraint? What is your outlook in terms of time to market? All these will help you to take you through this tree and give you some guidance to say, well, in your case, we think an eSIM is appropriate, or even a discrete SIM can still be totally applicable, or no, you need to go all the way to integrated. But that's simple steps, right, that can help you guide your choices into selecting your connectivity partners and ecosystem. Yeah, we'll be publishing that fairly shortly on our Kigen.com website and on social as well.
Excellent. Well, I will be promoting that number one from that point. That sounds like a fantastic resource, really. So, well, thank you, Loic, for allowing me to ask you a bunch of questions today. It's been a great pleasure to see you, and thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Toby. I really enjoyed the conversation, and we should do that more often.
Very true, very true. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, IoT Central, for having us on. It was great to be on the show today.
We hope you enjoyed this IoT Central podcast episode. Visit iotcentral.io for more insights and events. Thank you for listening.